My name's Tom Gibson, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Tom, thanks so much for joining me today on the program. It's always fun to see like the crossover between going somewhere and meeting someone in a completely different context, then having a conversation with them before we even hit record, where I'm like, wait, what? You did this? Like, I didn't even know that was your background. And then really finding the commonality that we have beyond that, which is being dads. So
Yeah.
thanks for taking the time to join me today. And for those that are like, what's Mike talking about? Like you used to work for Kit, right? Which is the service I use to deliver the lantern and all my emails. But during that time, you made children, I would imagine, and had children.
Yeah.
So now you have them, right?
I do have children of my own, yes.
So so the website is wfhdads.com, work from home dads. A lot of people during that pandemic era scenario ended up having to work from home. And did you start doing that before COVID-19, before the pandemic, or was it something that you were kind of thrust into and then you realized, oh, this is going to work for me as a parent? Like, how did you navigate that process? Because for myself and my wife, like I've always been a work from home dad since I started my business, right? So I'm wondering how that origin story played out for you.
Yeah, I started working from home in 2020, like a lot of other folks. It was very interesting. My daughter was born 2 weeks before the pandemic. And so it was very like my whole world has just changed, but the whole world was also changing. So I was already planning on like hunkering down and not really going anywhere for a little while. So, my plans didn't change too much. I was a classroom teacher at the time. And what's funny is like I had, these sub plans for someone that was going to be monitoring, my classes while I was out on paternity leave. And like like a week into the pandemic, I was like, hey, FYI, you're going to be going remote now and all this other stuff. And I was trying to like help him and support him and stuff. But even, obviously, past my paternity leave, I continued to work from home. And we were really kind of in those early years. It was like our first child, and we had some help from my parents and my wife's parents, and but it was kind of a tricky scenario because it was like you couldn't just like we weren't going to do daycare, we weren't going to do nannies because it's just there was so much in the air, but. Eventually, like I was working more of a hybrid scenario where I was going to school for a couple days a week and then working from home for a couple days a week. And we had a nanny. And then we got to the point where it's like, okay, we're not going to do the nanny, but, I kind of want to keep working from home. I really like this setup. But I don't want to just stay at home. I mean,
Right.
My wife, she's a pediatrician, so financially, like, we were fine, but I'm like, I need to work. Like, I need to be like, I'm totally fine with my wife making more money than me. I went into education, never expected to make a lot of money, but I need to be bringing in something. And I remember it was the summer of 2021. I was collaborating with a guy who was also a YouTuber because I was doing the content creator thing while I was a teacher and building up my own teacher business. But he was finding a lot more success with it, had online courses and communities and things like that. And so I partnered with him and we co-founded an organization called New EdTech Classroom. And I was basically training teachers how to leverage tech in the classroom. And that became a fully, now I'm fully working from home. And early on, like it actually worked out really well. My daughter, she napped for 3 hours a day, like clockwork. Like I'd put her down at noon and I would have to wake her up at 3 o'clock. And so like I would work early in the morning for a couple of hours, like 5:30, 7:30. And then my wife, she would go to work and it would just be me and Audrey for the morning. We'd go on a run, we'd go to the park, we'd hang out. And then I'd put her down for a nap and I would work from like 12 to 3. And so that was kind of like the routine for almost a year. And then, she started going into preschool and I had a month between when she started Montessori preschool and then when our second son, our second child came. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's this like? My daughter's in school. I've got all this time and stuff. And then my son came, and I was watching him for, his first year as well.
So
But yeah, that was what it was like.
real quick question about your son. Did he settle down for the 3-hour naps in the same fashion?
Yeah, turns out they are not all the same. So
Yeah.
he did not actually sleep for 3 hours a day. So that became pretty tricky, because he would only sleep for maybe an hour and a half, and I wasn't able to get the same amount of work done. But that was around the time that I transitioned from the startup to working for Kit. And I did work at Kit with him at home for his first year. And I had to kind of like, I found that like having meetings and watching him were not too bad because he was still in that baby stage, and I could kind of
Mm.
just set him on the floor, put the laptop on the couch. Like I think we have a mutual friend, Haley Janisic. She would be on calls with me, on the marketing team. And I would be like feeding my son a bottle while I'm like talking about like, yeah, I think like what we can try to do on YouTube in this quarter, I'm like talking YouTube strategy, while feeding him and all sorts of things like that. And then eventually, he ended up going to preschool a little sooner than my daughter, just because I did have to work a little bit more. But it really, for me, the early mornings and in having like conversations with my wife about like, these are when my work hours are, and these are when your hours are also working. And she was picking the kids up and coming home. And, I wasn't like, oh, I need to keep working. You need to watch them. It's like I would be wrapping up work. And so we had to be on like very clear communication of like who was working, just so like there wasn't that unmet expectation of just like, I thought you were going to watch them, or I thought you were going to watch them. And then it leads to like conflict and resentment and things like that.
Yeah, for the years that Ann and I were working, both, like she was working outside the home, but she did have some stuff inside the home as well, especially during COVID. Like there was obviously a lot of Zoom classes and so on and so forth that were going on. But it's interesting because that communication piece is so important, right? Like whether you're hybrid, whether you're work from, or even if you're not work from home, like
Mhm.
that is such a critical piece because, and I've noticed, especially as my kids have gotten older, that if it wasn't for that communication, like there would have been major gaps that would have affected our children, I think, in ways that we never would have totally realized, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to a couple other dads about this, and like they would tell me about some of their struggles. And what I think really helped us was that we had a default schedule every week. So it's
Mm,
like she knew like, okay, I woke up and I would be working from 5:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the morning, and she's getting the kids ready, getting them up. And then she would leave the house at 7:30. And so she knew like I was locked in until 7:30. And then I would watch the kids. I would take them to school at about 9 o'clock, 8:45, and then she would pick them up and then come home. And then I would work until 4:15. She would get home around 3:30 or so. And so like I had until 4:15, and we agreed 4:15 is the cutoff time, not 4:19 and not 4:22, like we agreed like this is the time that, that is my work time. And then I get the kids, and then she can either go work out or whatever she wants to do to decompress from the day. And then 5 o'clock, I start making dinner, and then, she watches the kids. And so like I had another friend, his partner wasn't working, and he's like, it just seemed like every day they were kind of just figuring out like, like she's asking, can I go work out today or tomorrow or something? And like they were trying to figure it out every single day instead of
yeah.
just being like, look, okay, 9:30 to 11:30 is your time. I'm gonna watch the boy, and that way he wasn't scheduling meetings at those times. He was like, and planning like if he had to get some work done or if he had to do something between 9:30 and 11:30, he's doing it with his son. And so it's like having that conversation and coming up with that default schedule that you both agree on. And then you can like say like, hey, she maybe has to go to work earlier someday, or maybe I have a meeting that I couldn't get, scheduled before 4 o'clock. And so I'm going to have to be working until 5 o'clock. Having those conversations are fine, and you can deviate from the plan. But if you're trying to figure out like, when's my work time and when's your time for yourself every week, it's exhausting. And it's like, you're not going to get work done. And we also had those conversations about like when I'm working, like, unless the house is on fire or you really, really need something, like I'm working. And the same with her. Like, whenever it's her time, unless like, hey, child's bleeding and you're the pediatrician. So, like, he has her. I'm not letting the kids go in the garage while she's trying to work out. It's like, no, that's mama's time. Like,
Mhm.
me and you are all gonna hang out together. So it's like having those conversations and respecting those boundaries, like, it's helped alleviate so much. Like, before we had that, it'd be like, oh, she'd be frustrated with me because they're going out in the garage, or I'd be frustrated with her because she's asking me to do this thing and I've got this call in 2 minutes. And, like, having those boundaries were like step one to like making this work for us. So that way there wasn't that miscommunication, that expectation. Oh, I thought you were going to get them, or I thought I was going to be able to. Oh, I wish you would have told me you had that meeting because then I would have gone to Orange Theory yesterday because I thought I was going to try to, it
Yeah.
creates all of that conflict.
Well, and the other thing is by having, and I like how you said deviate from the plan, because I think a lot of people get stuck on, well, we don't know what it's going to look like. So what's the point in planning? Well, the thing about planning is that it gives you, like you pointed out, a default, a baseline, right? Something foundational that you can build upon. And it's more scaffolding as opposed to like, a concrete thing, because I mean, things happen, right? Like, for example, doctor's appointments. You can't necessarily go, okay, well, I want my doctor appointment to be at this time all the time, because the doctors are going to say, well, no,
Yeah.
or a dentist appointment or what have you. But what it also allows you to do is when you have that, instead of being reactive, you can be responsive more often than not. You will have to react to certain things, but if you're
Yeah.
constantly in that reactive mode, you can't get deep into anything, whether it's personal or professional stuff. And one thing that I found interesting about when I was going through some of your content was the meal planning stuff. So,
Mhm.
how do you, the post, we'll link to it, is how I simplify meals as a dad without meal prepping. I found that fascinating because we actually have in our household, and we've done this since, pretty much, I'd say for the last 10 years, we have what we call the effing meeting, which is food, finance, fun, and family. That's what we talk about, right? And I don't like meetings, so we call it the effing meeting as a playful joke on it. Plus, it harkens back to my old days of doing effing the dog stuff as my productivity parody site. So, we don't necessarily talk about those things in order, because sometimes the finance can inform the food, and sometimes the family can inform the food as well. Because what if we're out that night? Like, what do meals look like? And again, we have a meal plan, but we don't always stick to it. As a matter of fact, this week, we were going to have ribs on Friday night. Well, my son, who's now 15, works at, he's an after school job. He won't be home. And we have our Japanese exchange student who's living with us now. We don't know if he'll be here. So
Mhm.
my wife and I are the only ones that are going to be home for dinner. So do we want to use the ribs that night, or do we want to have something else? So it gives you that kind of leeway. But when I saw that, like, I can't imagine going, I have no meal prep going on. I need to have that. Like, I literally have meal prep for tonight's dinner already ready to go. And we'll circle back to how this can carry on beyond your kids being at a young age. But can you share like
Mhm.
how you've simplified meal planning and why you think meal prep rather, and why you think it's so important to do that? Because I think that's another kind of leaky faucet that a lot of people run into.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's one less decision that you have to make from day to day. Like, oh, what are we gonna do? And I want to do this thing, but we don't have the ingredients. Like, for us, like, we first off, like, we we don't go grocery shopping. I think we've gone in the store to get all of our groceries with both of our kids like once. Like, I'll
How do
go
you do
in the store and grab.
how do you do produce? How do you do produce that
Yeah,
way? Like
I just
because
I
that's the
let
thing.
the shopper at my favorite grocery store in Texas called HEB. It was the first place I had a job. I was a bagger. I even worked in the produce section.
Mhm.
I just trust that they will give us good produce,
Okay.
and 8 out of 10 times they do. Yeah, but a lot of times, like, I'm the one in the family that cooks. I like to cook. It's what I do at the end of the day. It's like 5 o'clock comes,
It's the
and it's like, all right,
decompressing.
yeah, I
The some people garden, some people woodwork. For me, I'm the
yeah,
same. The cooking, I can be
yeah,
inventive, creative
yeah,
my brain can kind of shut off to a degree. I hear you on
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it's really nice too because like while I am cooking, my wife is in the kitchen and she's prepping the kids' lunches for tomorrow. And so like that's kind of like our time to just kind of connect and talk about our days. But every Friday night, we both open up our app, our HEB grocery store app. And then she just adds all the things that she needs for her lunches and for the kids' lunches and things like that. And then she's just like, okay, she just lets me decide, you're the one cooking. So just decide, what we're going to eat the next week. But I have like 8, 9 meals that I just kind of rotate through. It's like we are always, almost every week, we're having fajitas. Almost every week, we're probably going to have steak and green beans. Every week, we're going to have, maybe not every week, but a lot of weeks we'll have burgers. And so it's like, I'll go through in most grocery store apps, like you can save like these different recipes. So I'll go through. It's like, all right, so fajitas. I know we've got tortillas already, but we need meat, we need limes, we need this, we need that, we need avocados. Okay, let me just add those things. And so it's like it's all there. And so it takes me like 10 minutes to actually add all of the groceries that I need. And then I submit it, and then I go pick it up on Saturday morning. And that's usually a time where it's like, okay, kids, come on, let's go. I'm gonna go get the groceries. We'll go get in the we do the curbside, and they put it in the car.
Hmm.
And so my wife, she likes to plan out our weeks like physically on like a dry erase calendar. And so she'll actually have, the week up on the dry erase calendar. And then she'll even say like, she's like, did you have a plan for, what we were gonna eat? And then like even thinking through, like, okay, we almost always do fajitas on Tuesday because that always has leftovers, and then that will be leftovers for me to eat my lunches on Wednesday and Thursday. Because in that article you reference, I'm like, I hate meal prepping. I don't want to spend half of my Sunday like creating food that is going to be 6 days old on Friday by the time that I get to it. And I'm at home and I work from home, so I have the freedom to be able to like cook something, but I'm not gonna like make fajitas from scratch for lunch or anything like that. And so I have a default lunch every day where it's like I have a big bowl. My colleagues at Kit used to make fun of me because I just took like a big mixing bowl, a big metal mixing bowl, and then I just put a ton of spring mix in it. And then typically it's like I'll take some protein. Usually, maybe if we had leftover pork tenderloin, or if I had leftover fajitas, or if I had leftover steak, and I'll just heat that up on the stove. Maybe I'll throw an egg in there to add some protein. I'll add some cheese and I'll add some salsa. I'll dump all of that on my bed of spring mix, and then that's my lunch. It's like
Yeah.
a low carb lunch. It's hot, it's cheesy, it's got salsa on it, and I eat that every day, almost every day. For lunch. And so it's like, I don't have to think, what am I going to eat for lunch today? I don't have to think about what am I going to make for dinner today. It's all like planned out. It's ready to go. We make changes just like you. And I'm like, oh, actually, I'm going to be out Thursday night. And so let's move that one to Friday. Or I don't actually like this one. So you can make that with the kids.
Hmm.
And then we'll make the adjustments that way. But it just goes back to like the less I can like mental energy I have to put into like, what am I eating today? The better it's going to be for me and everybody.
Well, and the thing we actually have a magnetic calendar that is whiteboard, dry erase, all that stuff. And we've had that for years. Like we probably should get a new one, but why? It's working.
Yeah.
And we have different colors for different family members, and we have a joint family color. We have a color that is like, for example, garbage day or whatever. Like we use clear identifiers. And I think the thing is I mean, obviously for what I do for a living, I can use filters till forever. And I would recognize them. But with kids, you need to create simple kind of, simple signals, but also for adults that are moving through it too. Like my wife can look at the menu for the week that we planned on Sunday and go, oh, my color is this. So I know I'm cooking Monday, Tuesday. And Mike's got the
Mhm.
rest of the week. And so, because my color is orange. And so we can see that really easily. And we can also see the same color on the appointments. Like, oh, Mike has to go do a talk on Saturday at this bookstore. I can see that there. And the only reason that's on that calendar upstairs is because it's on a weekend. None of my other stuff needs to be there unless I need to use the car. We are a one car family. Like, so you figure these things out as you go too. Like it's all very dynamic. And I think that level of just creating those static points, like you brought up, like the other day we had tacos and we had leftover stuff. Well, guess what I had next day for lunch? Taco salad. I took that's what I did. Last night we had pasta. I made pasta in the Instant Pot. I made a slow cooked, fresh from our tower garden, all the ingredients. We have leftover pasta sauce. Guess what I'm having for lunch today? I'm having pasta, right? So I mean, again, if you can create those static points and when you've got that on your side, then it allows for, and I think this is where people kind of get thrown off, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is the rigidity. It feels rigid to some people. Like they feel like, oh, but we're not spontaneous enough. Whether you have kids or not, whether you work from home, I mean, the thing is, those like waypoints or those static elements, to me, they actually feel that they give you the freedom to be spontaneous and to really experience that, because you know that, okay, well, every Sunday we have this meeting and every Tuesday is fajita night, right? Like, so I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think it's not just something that would benefit your kids, but also benefits your relationship with your partner.
Yeah, there's definitely room for spontaneous stuff, because a lot of times, like, my wife will just say, like, "Hey, like maybe we could go get dinner with our friends from church on Friday," and it's not like I'm like, I said on the calendar that we are supposed to be eating pork tenderloin, and so we are eating pork tenderloin." It's like, okay, great. We'll make the pork tenderloin on Saturday. It's like it doesn't mean you can't stray from the plan. It just makes it easier to stray from the plan, because you have a plan in place whenever you don't want to have to think about straying
Mhm.
from the plan. So it creates those opportunities, and it creates that freedom to do those things. And even you talking about like that your calendar. My wife does the same thing. Like we have a Sunday. We just chat every Sunday and just kind of sync up on like, where are things going to be deviated from the default schedule this
Yeah.
week. Because sometimes, like, okay, Tuesday we Audrey's got an appointment. Sometimes my wife likes to take off on appointments and go with Audrey, and sometimes like I'm the one taking her to the appointment. So I'm like, are you taking that Tuesday off, or am I gonna have to take her? Oh yeah, you're gonna take her. Okay, great. So now I know Tuesday I am gonna be off, and Audrey's color, it shows the appointment, and I'm like, oh, Saturday I plan on going to jujitsu at 11 o'clock. Did you want to do your Orange Theory early in the morning? So Sarah's writing, Orange Theory in her color, jujitsu in my color. So we have those conversations, so that way we can, we can make the stray, the deviations from the default, and then maybe sometimes even in the middle of the week we have a spontaneous thing of what we want to go do, or it was a rough day and we're all feeling pizza on Wednesday, so we're just going to go get pizza, and it doesn't matter that wasn't on the schedule. We make adjustments as needed. But yeah, because you have a plan doesn't mean you can't stray from the plan easily when you want to.
I want to talk about journaling for a minute, because anyone who's listened to this show before or followed my work knows I am a huge advocate for reflective practices, including journaling. I think it's undervalued, underappreciated. You can go back to listening to a podcast I did with the Fizzle guys way back in the day, where we said, Chase and I talked about journaling being such a huge component. You've got a piece, we'll link to it in the show notes, about why you changed your journaling practice after 15 years. First off, love you called it a practice, because a lot of people who don't recognize that a practice means it's like you're never going to get it perfect. It's yours,
Mhm.
right? But can you share a little bit about your journaling journey? Because I know for me that has allowed me to be okay with some of the static things and the dynamic elements. There is stuff in my journal that when I'm gone, uh, I either my kids might go, "Oh, dad was having a bad day because look what he said about me that day," or whatever. Because I need to do that in order to
Yeah.
make sure that I can actually be the best version of myself as much as possible. So I'd love to hear about your journaling practice. First off, why do you find journaling such a valuable thing for you? Like when did you recognize that was something for you that you needed to have or really wanted to have? And then what was the change?
I think my earliest journals that I have are from like 2007, so I was kind of in college. I mean, I had some stuff from earlier, but just like that was like when I started writing more regularly. I feel I've always been someone who loves to document things. I mean, it started out with journaling, but like I even remember in college, like before like newsletters, email newsletters were like a thing. I would send basically a newsletter to like friends and family on like what was going on in college. It's like just documenting like this process. And then of course, YouTube and all sorts of things like that.
Do you remember Live Journal back in the day?
Oh, yeah, I had a live journal. I
Yeah,
had
there
that too, and I deleted that. I deleted that once I like,
you
why did I think in 2006 that it would be a good idea to post all of these unfiltered thoughts of a 17-year-old? So, yeah, that the live journal was deleted, but I did have a live journal. I had, like, the MySpace. I had, all sorts of stuff, but I think it was like, I remember years later, I heard Penn Jillette on Tim Ferriss's podcast saying that journaling is the closest thing we have to time travel.
Yeah.
And he talked about how you can just go and like you're reading the words that you don't even remember writing because you were a completely different person. And you get into that mindset like, oh man, like yeah, this is what I was thinking through when I was 19, when I was 24, when I was 32. And I started writing almost daily, probably in 2015, because I had a colleague of mine. She had just had a baby. This was 5 years before we had our kids. And I remember she said something that with me. She said, like, I just think about my life before kids. And I was like, what the hell was I even doing with my time? Like, how did I ever think like I didn't have time for anything? I didn't have any kids, and that stuck with me. And I'm like, I want to be able to say, like, oh, this is what I did on a random Tuesday in July when I was a teacher in 2016 and was on summer break. Like, what was I doing with all my summers when my wife was working 80-hour weeks in residency and I was off the summer as a teacher? I didn't have any kids. And so it's been like just a way of documenting things and working through things and thinking through things. And, you know, in that in that in that article that you referenced, what I found was like I would enjoy going back and reading my journals for the year, like
Mhm.
reading like all what went on in 2023 and 2024. And I found when I was journaling daily, it almost just became like I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, which reading back was just not very interesting. The stuff that when I would read back was like, "Oh, like, Audrey did this one thing that was kind of funny," or,
Yeah.
"Oh, someone said this thing to me that and I remember feeling this way," or, "Oh, I said this thing to Sarah, and I really wish I would've, phrased it differently or said it different." The things where I was actually reflecting on, like, emotions that I was feeling or thoughts that I was having, as opposed to, like, ran 7 miles, then worked on a YouTube video, then did like, that wasn't as interesting to me. And so, what I found was, like, the less frequently I journaled, where it was like, if I only journaled, like, maybe once or twice a week, I didn't have the space and capacity to just list everything that I did. And so I was like, oh, it was an interesting week, like, I took the kids to go run downtown in Austin. And, it was funny because Audrey was just saying how much she just loves like being outside and being out in the trees. And I really want to just make more time for that as opposed to always just running in the neighborhood on the concrete, not, things like that. And so it helped me kind of scope out a little bit and think of like my week as a whole. And something that I just started implementing that I'm surprised by how valuable it's been is Anne Laura Lecomte's kind of reflection framework where it's like plus minus next,
Mhm.
where I'm still writing about like so every Sunday I sit down and that's when I journal. The kids are taking their nap or their rest time. And I'll just write stream of conscious just about like the week that I had, and then at the end of that, I'll create this little chart that she has where it's like three columns. There's the plus column, the minus column, and the next column. And then the plus is a lot of it. I just kind of recap some of the highlights of the week. Some of it I've already written about, but it's almost in this little bullet point list. The minus is the things that didn't go great. Sometimes there's things in there that I didn't actually reflect on, but I just notate it. And then the next, sometimes it's related to the pluses and the minuses. Sometimes it's just like what I'm hoping to get done this next week. But what's really fun is like, you know, the next week when I sit down to write, I don't reread everything from the last week, but I do reread that plus minus next chart. And then I'm like, oh, I got all that next stuff done. Or like, oh, I did more of that plus stuff that I was talking about, you know? And so that's been a helpful practice. And that's what I would, if someone is like not journaling, I think that's like such a wonderful entry point. Like at the end of the week or at the start of a week, like reflecting on the week and just making a three columned chart where you just bullet point like what were the good things this week, you know? And it doesn't have to be big. Like sometimes it was like, you know, just have making dinner with while Sarah was making lunches. We just had a nice time to connect on Wednesday. The minus doesn't have to be a big minus thing. It could just be like, you know what, I don't like, you know, I don't like pork tenderloin anymore, and I don't think I'm gonna add it to the rotation for a few weeks. I'm tired of eating pork
Yeah.
tenderloin, you know. So, but that's just how it's kind of evolved, and I really I've loved because when I was in college, I went on these summer mission trips with the Christian organization that I was a part of, and I even had one where I went to Greece for 5 weeks. And I recently just reread that entire little. I had one dedicated journal about like my time as like you know a 22 year old living in Greece for 5 weeks and doing you know mission work there, and it was just so interesting because like I had forgotten like 80% of that stuff. And I was like, oh yeah. And like I texted one of my friends that I went on the trip with. I was like, I totally don't even remember. I was like just hanging out and smoking cigars on the patio in Athens, Greece. Like, how cool is that?
Well, and what's cool about that is that you've taken the idea of chronologically logging something and it's the story, right? Because
Mm.
and what's really cool about the reflection back to your time in Greece is that you can trust it because you wrote it in that moment. So
Hmm.
it's not diluted or anything like that because you know, oh well, I remember that was written at the time. So this is exactly how I felt then, and here's how I feel now.
Yeah.
I love Ann Lore's stuff. That plus minus next. There's some people in my community that are doing it. Ann Lore's been on the show before, so if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, anyone who's listening right now, and there are a few people listening, go back and check in the archives for that episode. Thom, before I let you go, I want to talk about the playbook
Mhm.
because you've got the 6-Hour Workday Playbook where you'll reclaim 10 hours a week for your family, your health, and your passion projects. And this is the kind of thing that, I mean, now that my kids are kind of grown, it's really interesting for me how I'm trying to figure out. And I had this, speaking of journaling, I had this kind of epiphany a few months ago after my daughter moved to Montreal full time. And it was like, oh, I wasn't a guy running a business who happened to be the stay-at-home dad. I was a stay-at-home dad that happened to be running a business. And when I had that flip, I'm like, this is why I'm struggling right now because my main purpose has been not compromised, but it's changing, right? Because my kids
Mhm.
don't need me as much anymore. And as soon as I reflected on that, I'm like, it changed it. I'm like, okay, so now my role is different. My daughter, for example, like we Snapchat pretty much every day. And you
Mhm.
know, my son obviously he's here, but he after school wants to go hang out with his friends and so on and so forth. So to have that flip it has been really interesting, and to be able to not only recognize it but lean into it has been powerful. But there's not been a lot of resources for work from home dads uh, out
Mhm.
there. I wish I had something like that when it started, just like most people wish there was a manual to raise your kids. But let's talk a bit about the playbook before we wrap up, because I think that there is a growing population of work from home, stay at home dads that could use the benefit of your experience and your wisdom.
Yeah, I found like I was, you know, when I would talk to some other dads who either worked from home full time or even just had hybrid days, like just hearing that they were working like 9, 10, 11 hours a day, it's just like, oh, that is so much time because you're like, you're not even, you're not counting like a 45-minute commute and as a part of that, like you would normally do. And I think like, man, there's so much opportunity, so many things you are missing out on when you're having to work that much. And like in a lot of ways, like so many of the dads that I talk to, there is such a difficulty like creating that separation between work and home, between work and life and family. And I think that they end up like when they're working, they're feeling guilty about like not spending time with the family. When they're with their family, they're feeling guilty about the stuff that's like piling up at work. And so it's like they just never felt like they feel like they're not doing either of them well,
Right.
you know?
Plus, there's still probably a stigma associated for some where it's like, why am I not out of the house working, and why is my partner doing that? Like, there's still some of that, I think, underpinning there. Not for everybody, but there is still a social or a code around that to a degree in some cultures, in some societies, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so like the more I talk to dads though that were just running into this myriad of different struggles, I wanted to put something where it's like, okay, like imagine what would be possible if you had like more time. If you like focus your work time down to like 6 very focused hours of the day as opposed to like 10 or 11 unfocused hours where you're kind of working but you're kind of watching the kids and you're kind of doing housework and all this other stuff. And so the whole idea is that you could get a 6-hour workday. Now, some days you're going to have a little bit more, and some days you're going to have a little bit less. But like I believe a lot of dads can have that 6-hour workday. And so the playbook really breaks it up into a lot of the stuff that we were talking about today. Like the first thing is like thinking through like first take an inventory of your week. Like where is your time going? Where's awful at kind of actually figuring out and estimating where our time is going. And I talk about different ways that you can do that with pen and paper, different apps you can do with that. But a lot of times it's like you don't even realize how much time you're spending in meetings and prepping for meetings, for remote work dads. Another part of the playbook is actually like how do you have that conversation with your partner, the coming up with the default schedule, that we talked about, and like having that Sunday conversation where you're planning for the week and making sure that everybody's aligned. And then I walk through exactly like how do you create the weekly map, like you've got to-dos coming in all these different directions from Slack to email to calendar invites to your project management system, and it's all over the place. Like how do you curate everything into one place at the beginning of the week, and before you just start reacting to stuff, like what are my top priorities, what are my medium priorities would be great to get to, what are my low priorities which if I don't get to it's not the end of the world. And then you have that and you look at it every single day before you get started on anything and establish your daily most important things, your MITs. And so I walk through like how do you actually identify like what the things are you going to do that's going to move the needle either in your business or in your job, and not like, and if you have 5 meetings that day, like don't act like you have 0 meetings that day and give yourself a to-do list that's just as long as the 0 meeting day. And so the playbook just walks through all of those things. A big part of it too is like I modified Tim Ferriss's automate, delegate, and eliminate, and I added one in there called renegotiate because I think there's so many. I was talking to one dad and he's like, is a 6-hour day possible for me? Like I'm a global team lead and I have like 6 calls a day usually just at a bare minimum. And I'm like, maybe, maybe not, but maybe there are some meetings that you don't have to do as frequently, or maybe there's some meetings that you don't have to spend. If they're a 60-minute meeting, maybe it could be a 30-minute meeting. If it's a 30-minute meeting, maybe it could be a 20-minute meeting. Maybe there's some meetings that could just be asynchronous check-ins. Like you don't have to just be like, I'm getting rid of meetings because that's not realistic for most people. But there are things that you can renegotiate and think through, like how can I be spending less time on this? So the playbook, it's a course of 5 emails over 5 days. I even have like a companion Notion document that you can duplicate, so that way you can take notes and get the links to everything that I mentioned and help you kind of start moving towards that 6-hour workday. So you can spend more time with your kids. You can, like me, I can put my kids down for bed and not rush it because I'm trying to get back to my home office and get back to work. I can make dinner for my family. I can go on runs with my son before I take him to school. And have time for building my side business, have time for going to jujitsu in the middle of the day, a couple days a week if I want. So it frees up just so many opportunities that I think a lot of dads could really benefit from.
Well, Thom, we're going to put that in the show notes along with some of the other stuff we talked about today. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to have a productive conversation with me today. Where can people keep up with the work that you're doing?
WFH, work from home, WFHdads.com/playbook would be the best place to get the playbook. And then you could just search Thom Gibson on LinkedIn, THOM. Thom, short for Thomas. We mentioned Radiohead a little earlier a while ago. A little background. I rebranded myself in college where I was like, you know what? My name has an H in it. Why am I spelling it TOM? I like Radiohead. I like Tom York. And so I started spelling my name THOM in college, and it is stuck. But it does have an H, so I don't know. No one gets onto the Christophers of the world when he retains his H when he spells it Chris. So Thom Gibson on LinkedIn, that's where I'm most active, and I'm about to start the YouTube channel as well. So if you just search WFH Dads on YouTube, I'll be over there.
Well, and when it comes to the Thom part, you made that decision, which means you do it to yourself. You do. And it didn't hurt in that case, though.
You do it to yourself. Perfect.
Thom, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
My pleasure.